Hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle and this is Afterburner. Well, welcome to the world of tolerance and diversity, that glorious future of openness and understanding. It's an age of marvels, this politically correct salad of different flavors and tastes, that rich tapestry where every thread shines with every color of the rainbow. For example, support a position different from someone else's, lose your job. Tweet something someone finds offensive, well, off to re-education camp. Or crack open a copy of The Great Gatsby or Huckleberry Finn or The Merchant of Venice or any of the other trauma-laden, panic-inducing, insanity defense-type psychotic break-causing books inadvertently. Well, let's get some trigger warnings on these dangerous materials. What's a trigger warning, obsolete oldster? Well, it's a warning that books like the ones I mentioned, hazardous materials formerly known as literature, might contain triggers. What's a trigger? Post-optimal worker unit? Well, let's check in with what is likely the most liberal college in America, Oberlin College, where reason and logic go to die. Triggers are not only relevant to sexual misconduct, but also anything that might cause trauma. Be aware of racism, classism, sexism, heterosexism, cisexism, ableism, and other issues of privilege and oppression. Realize that all forms of violence are traumatic and that your students have lives before and outside your classroom, experiences you may not expect or understand. Now, this most recent advance in morality has mostly been brought to us courtesy of feminism. You know, the intellectual and political movement whose central tenet is that women are in every way as strong and as capable as men, which is why they must be protected at all times from thoughts and ideas that could cause them to break down into emotional fits and uncontrolled hysterics. So, there's a movement underway now to put trigger warnings on books on college campuses so that feminists and other impressionable children do not accidentally come into contact with materials intended for adults. Let me explain to you what's going on here biologically. This constant humming and rocking and sticking our fingers in our ears to avoid the physical sensations of fear and anxiety brought on by something we don't particularly care for is the result of ongoing atrophy of a critical part of the brain. It's called the amygdala, and like memory, its capabilities grow or recede depending on how much it's being used. Now, the amygdala has been derided as the fear center of the brain, something to be liberated from, presumably, but it's much more sophisticated than that. The amygdala is essential to learning because it's the amygdala that sends out unpleasant signals that cause you to change your behavior. Now, here's a classic example of how the amygdala is supposed to work. You're walking down a path, minding your own business, when you hear the rustling of grass and the snap of a twig behind you. A moment later, there's a leopard on your back trying to bite through your throat. Now, should you survive that experience, the next time you hear the rustle of grass and the snap of a twig, you won't have to stop and wonder where you've heard that before. Your amygdala doesn't need any of that higher level cognitive reasoning. You hear that snapping twig behind you the second time and the amygdala hits the panic button, you get a hit of adrenaline, you automatically turn towards the sound, your mouth opens and you scream, both to try to scare the leopard and to call for aid, and you are immediately ready to either fight or flee. Now, guys like, say, SEAL team operators, they don't need trigger warnings on The Great Gatsby, and they don't feel a panic attack at a protest sign, and they're not enraged by a tweet they don't like. Their amygdala is calibrated against real threats. They hear the sound of a pistol being racked, and that's pretty much all they need to know. They know exactly what to do from that point. Anything much less than that, and they pretty much just roll with it. But the more we coddle and isolate and pamper and reinforce these college-level children, the more atrophied their amygdala response becomes until the sight of a Pop-Tart chewed into the shape of a gun causes them to evacuate the building. So, since this is all about hurt feelings, do you want to know how this makes me feel? It makes me feel sick, frankly. It's activating my amygdala response. It makes me feel sick with worry because you remove the amygdala from a mouse and it will walk right up to a cat, snuggle up against it, and promptly get eaten. It also makes me feel old because I've been around long enough to see trend lines now, and I don't like where this one is going. But mostly, it makes me feel like this guy. That's the time traveler in H.G. Wells' classic, The Time Machine. Warning, The Time Machine contains scenes of cannibalism, war, claustrophobia, racism, sexism, speciesism, and morlockophobia. Now, this Victorian-era time traveler, as you recall, is catapulted into the far, far future, 2014, let's say, where humans have evolved into docile, beautiful, simple-minded sheep. where what were once men sit by passively and watch as women drown right before their eyes, where laughter and sunshine and food are endless and no one works and no one assaults anyone physically, verbally, or in writing. The Eloi, Wells called them, and if that's not what we are, it's certainly what we're becoming. So what if you spend your life as a simple-minded child? Big deal. You get to do whatever you want all the time, and you look good, that's the main thing. But unfortunately, down below, some people did not get the memo. Those people are called Morlocks. They're ugly and misshapen. They live in caves. They look like they could belong to the Tea Party. And they eat the Eloi. They eat them. They raise them just like cattle. They just blow a siren and the Eloi, like the mouse without the amygdala, just walk right in and become dinner. So, if you think you can regulate, legislate, ban, re-educate, and trigger warn evil people away, you're wrong. Evil people and evil deeds are kept at bay by adults. Adults who can face blood and fire and the Great Gatsby because they turn to face unpleasantness, not run away from it. And if you think you can remove discomfort from life, well, you're wrong there too. Because ultimately, your shriveled amygdala will cause you a complete psychotic break when you see a color you don't like. The less unpleasantness you get, the less unpleasantness it takes. Now, the inverse is also true, but that requires courage, of course, and acts of courage require trigger warning, so don't hold your breath. Now, we're on a race to the bottom. And damn it, you idiots, that's where the Morlocks live.